The moon hung low in the night sky, casting a pale, silvery glow across the snow-covered forest. Every tree stood still, its branches weighed down by frost, and the air was so cold it felt like the world itself had stopped breathing. In the midst of that quiet, a tiny shape moved slowly through the drifts, a small puppy, barely old enough to be away from its mother. Its fur was thin, and each breath it exhaled turned into a fragile puff of white mist that quickly disappeared into the night. Its paws sank into the soft snow, making it stumble with almost every step. The little one didn't know where it was going. All it knew was that it was alone, lost, and desperately trying to survive. The forest, in its stillness, was deceptive. To anyone looking, it might have seemed beautiful and peaceful, but for a creature as small and defenseless as the puppy, it was a place full of unseen dangers. The shadows between the trees were deep, and in those shadows, life moved quietly, life that hunted, watched, and waited. The puppy's tiny whimpers floated into the air, soft at first, then slightly louder, as though hoping that someone, anyone, might hear and come to its aid. But in a place like this, such sounds could also draw the wrong kind of attention. Far in the distance, something stirred. The crunch of snow under heavy paws echoed faintly, so faintly that the puppy didn't hear it at first. But in the dark, other creatures did. Sharp ears twitched, and yellow eyes blinked open. From the depths of the trees, they began to emerge, one pair of eyes, then another, and another, until they were many. The wolves moved in silence at first, blending seamlessly into the dark. Their coats, a mix of gray, black, and white, camouflaged them perfectly against the snow and shadows. The leader of the pack, a massive wolf with a jagged scar running down the side of his muzzle, led them with a slow, deliberate pace. His breath steamed in the icy air, and his gaze was locked on the tiny, trembling form ahead. The puppy stopped walking. It could feel something, an instinct it didn't yet understand telling it to freeze. Its ears twitched. Its heartbeat pounded faster. It took a step back, its paws sinking deeper into the snow, but the wolves were already spreading out, forming a circle. They moved with deadly grace, their paws making almost no sound despite their size. The snow absorbed the noise, but their presence was loud in another way, the quiet, dangerous hum of predators closing in. The alpha lowered his head, his eyes narrowing. His movements were calm, confident, as if this situation was already decided. Around him, the other wolves exchanged quick glances, their bodies tense with anticipation. Their hunger was not the kind of hunger that could be reasoned with, it was the raw, unyielding need for survival that had kept their kind alive for thousands of years. The tiny puppy in front of them was not a threat. It was not even a challenge. It was food. The wind picked up, carrying the faint rustle of dry leaves and the scent of fear. The puppy's small body trembled uncontrollably. It had no way to fight, no place to hide, and no one to protect it. It glanced left, then right, searching for a way out, but the circle of wolves was closing in too quickly. The snow seemed deeper here, trapping its little legs as if the forest itself wanted to hold it in place. One of the younger wolves broke formation slightly, testing the puppy's reaction. The tiny creature tried to back away, letting out a high-pitched whimper that sounded more like a plea than a warning. The younger wolf's ears flicked forward, intrigued, but he didn't move closer just yet. The alpha gave a low growl, a deep rumble that rolled through the cold air. It was a signal, patience. They had time. The little one wasn't going anywhere. The moonlight glinted off sharp teeth as the wolves shifted their weight, preparing to strike. The alpha took one step forward, then another, his massive frame casting a shadow over the puppy. The sound of his breathing was heavy, deliberate. The rest of the pack moved in sync, their bodies low to the ground, eyes locked on the same point. The puppy's ears flattened against its head, its eyes wide with a mix of terror and confusion. Every sound seemed amplified now, the crunch of snow under paws, the faint creak of a tree branch in the wind, the quiet panting of hungry predators. The puppy's own heartbeat roared in its ears. It took another step back, and its paw slipped on the icy crust of snow, making it stumble. That stumble seemed to be the final signal the alpha needed. He lowered his head further, lips curling back to reveal teeth meant for tearing. His growl deepened, vibrating in the cold air, and the other wolves mirrored his movement. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind stilled for a moment, as though the world was watching and waiting for what would happen next. The wolves were ready. The puppy, helpless and shivering, stood frozen in place. Its eyes darted from one predator to another, as if searching for even the slightest hint of mercy, but there was none. Then, without warning, the alpha shifted his weight forward, muscles coiling like a spring about to be released. The rest of the pack tensed in unison, prepared to strike the instant he did. The tiny creature had nowhere to run, no strength to fight. The night was thick with the scent of danger, the feeling of inevitability heavy in the air. And in that exact moment, when the first movement toward the kill was about to be made, something in the distance broke the silence. It wasn't a sound that belonged in the delicate stillness of the forest. It was deep, thunderous, and powerful, so much so that it seemed to roll through the ground itself. The wolves froze mid-step, their ears snapping upright, their eyes flicking toward the source. The puppy, still trembling, didn't understand what had just interrupted the deadly dance. But whatever it was enough to make the predators pause. And in a forest where hesitation could mean everything, that pause would change everything that was about to happen. The sound that split the night was unlike anything the forest had heard in a long time. It wasn't the sharp bark of a rival wolf or the rustle of a deer fleeing through the trees, it was a deep, primal roar that seemed to shake the air itself. It rolled over the snowy ground like thunder, echoing between the frozen trunks, growing louder with every heartbeat. The wolves stiffened instantly, the alpha halting mid-step. His scarred muzzle twitched as he sniffed the air, his instincts sending a sudden jolt of warning through him. Whatever had made that sound was not something to take lightly. The puppy stood frozen, still trembling from the terror of the wolves, but now its wide eyes turned toward the darkness beyond. It didn't know whether this new presence was a savior or another danger, but it could feel the vibration in the ground as something massive approached. The wolves turned their heads, ears flicking back and forth, uncertain for the first time that night. Predators rarely hesitate, but they also know when to respect a greater power. Then, from between the trees, it emerged. A hulking shape moved into the moonlight, its black fur glistening with frost, its breath coming in hot, heavy bursts. It was enormous, dwarfing even the largest wolf in the pack. Its shoulders rolled like boulders as it walked, each step slow but powerful, the snow crunching beneath paws that were more like dinner plates than feet. It was a bear, a massive one, its eyes burning with a mixture of alertness and a strange kind of determination. The alpha wolf gave a low growl, not of aggression this time, but of warning to his pack. The younger wolves shuffled uncertainly. This was no ordinary encounter. Bears were not something to challenge lightly, especially not in the dead of winter, when their strength was at its peak and their patience was thin. But the bear did not come with the slow caution of a wandering scavenger, it moved with purpose, straight toward the circle of wolves, straight toward the trembling puppy in their midst. With almost no warning, the bear let out another roar, louder and fiercer than the first. The sound was so powerful that it seemed to vibrate in the very bones of the creatures around it. Snow shook from the low branches above. The wolves reacted instantly, two of them flinched backward, tails lowering instinctively. The alpha held his ground for a moment longer, but his body language shifted. He no longer looked like a predator in control, he looked like one calculating whether the risk was worth it. The bear didn't wait for them to decide. With a sudden, explosive movement that seemed impossible for something so massive, it lunged forward, swiping a paw the size of a man's head toward the nearest wolf. The blow didn't even land squarely, but the sheer force sent the wolf tumbling several feet into the snow, yelping in shock. Another wolf tried to dart in from the side, testing the bear's speed, but the massive creature pivoted with astonishing agility, jaws snapping shut with a sound like cracking wood. The wolf backed off immediately, hackles raised but courage fading. The alpha wolf snarled, trying to rally his pack, but their confidence had cracked. The younger wolves had already begun to retreat, darting between the trees, their survival instincts overriding any hunger they felt. The bear stepped forward again, each move deliberate and unyielding. Its presence was a wall, impenetrable, unshakable. The alpha held his ground for only a moment longer, his golden eyes meeting the bear's dark, unwavering stare. It was a silent exchange, but the meaning was clear: this is not your prey. With a frustrated huff, the alpha finally turned, melting back into the forest shadows. One by one, the rest of the pack followed, their paw steps fading until the only sound left was the faint rustle of wind through the bare branches. The night was still again, but it was no longer the stillness of danger, it was the stillness that comes after a storm has passed. The puppy, still frozen in place, didn't move. Its mind was struggling to keep up with what had just happened. Moments ago, it had been surrounded by death, and now it stood in the shadow of something even larger, but this giant hadn't attacked. Instead, it simply stood there, breathing steadily, eyes locked on the small creature as if studying it. The bear lowered its head slowly, moving with a gentleness that seemed almost impossible for such a powerful animal. Its dark nose brushed against the puppy's fur, and the pup flinched at first, unsure of this new contact. But instead of teeth, there was only warmth. The bear gave a small, almost curious snuffle, and then nudged the puppy closer to the thick fur of its chest. The warmth radiating from the bear was overwhelming compared to the icy air, and for the first time that night, the puppy's shivering began to ease just slightly. It was a strange sight, the massive bear and the tiny pup, two creatures from opposite ends of nature's scale, standing together under the pale moonlight. The bear glanced around once more, scanning the tree line for any sign of the wolves' return. Satisfied that the danger had passed, it lowered itself onto its front paws, making its enormous frame seem just a little less intimidating. The puppy, still hesitant, took a small step toward the bear's thick fur. The smell was strong, earthy, wild, and ancient, but it was also comforting. The bear waited patiently, its steady breath creating small clouds of vapor in the cold. After a long moment, the puppy pressed itself against the warmth, and the bear remained perfectly still, as though understanding that trust took time. Minutes passed like that, with the two of them under the quiet watch of the moon. The forest, once a place of danger, now felt like a silent witness to an unspoken agreement. The bear wasn't going to leave the pup alone. Whatever had driven it to intervene, a sense of curiosity, a spark of instinct, or something deeper, it had chosen to stand between the small creature and the dangers of the night. Slowly, the bear rose to its feet again, careful not to jostle the puppy too much. It glanced in the direction the wolves had fled, then back toward the far edge of the forest, where a faint scent of wood smoke lingered in the air. Somewhere beyond those trees, human life waited. The bear lowered its head, letting the puppy climb awkwardly against its fur, and began to walk, each step steady and deliberate. The night was still bitterly cold, but the puppy could feel the steady rhythm of the bear's movement, the heartbeat beneath that thick wall of muscle and fur. And for the first time since it had wandered into the forest, it felt something that had been missing all night: safety. The journey through the forest was long, and the cold clung to everything like an invisible predator. The moon had begun its slow descent toward the horizon, and the first faint blush of dawn crept into the sky. The bear moved with steady, deliberate steps, each one sending a deep crunch into the snow beneath its massive paws. The puppy, nestled against the bear's thick fur, felt each movement like a slow, calming heartbeat. The warmth radiating from its rescuer was the only thing keeping the cold from sinking into its tiny bones. Every so often, the bear would pause, lifting its head to sniff the air. Its dark eyes scanned the silent trees, always vigilant for signs of danger. The wolves had fled, but danger in the wild was rarely limited to one threat. Still, nothing dared cross their path. The bear's sheer size and presence carved a path of safety through the forest, a path the puppy could never have taken alone. As they moved deeper toward the forest's edge, the snow began to change. It was no longer as deep here. Patches of frozen grass poked through in spots where the wind had swept the ground bare. The trees grew thinner, and the spaces between them opened into wider paths. In the distance, the faintest wisp of gray smoke curled upward into the sky. It twisted lazily, a fragile sign of life in the otherwise untouched wilderness. The bear stopped for a moment, watching the smoke. Its breath steamed in the air, and for a brief second, it glanced down at the small creature nestled in its fur, as if deciding what to do next. The puppy, oblivious to the decision being made, lifted its head weakly, its tiny nose twitching. The smell of wood and something faintly warm, fire, was unfamiliar, but oddly comforting. The bear made its choice and continued forward. The closer they came to the smoke, the more the forest changed. There were faint tracks in the snow, boot prints, small piles of chopped wood stacked neatly near a frozen stream, and the distant creak of something swaying in the wind. The world no longer felt wild here. Finally, the trees broke, revealing a small clearing. In the center stood a wooden cabin, weathered by years of storms but still sturdy. The roof was dusted with snow, and from the chimney, the smoke rose thicker now, carrying with it the smell of burning pine. Beside the cabin, a man stood chopping firewood, his breath puffing out in little white clouds. His axe rose and fell in a steady rhythm until a sound in the distance made him freeze. It was the crunch of snow, heavy, slow, deliberate. The man's eyes narrowed, and he turned toward the treeline. At first, he saw nothing, just the long shadows of dawn stretching across the clearing. Then, a massive black shape emerged from between the trees. His grip on the axe tightened instinctively. Bears were not strangers in this part of the wilderness, but they were rarely this close to a home. His mind raced. Should he retreat inside, reach for the rifle above his door, or stand his ground? The bear, however, did not charge. It walked with a steady, calm pace, each step sure and measured. The man's eyes widened slightly when he noticed something moving against the bear's chest, a small, pale shape, nestled into its fur. He blinked, unsure if the cold was playing tricks on his eyes, but as the bear drew closer, the shape became clear. It was a puppy, tiny, shivering, and alive. The bear stopped a short distance away, close enough for the man to see the frost clinging to its fur and the steady rise and fall of its massive chest. Then, with surprising gentleness, it lowered its head and let the puppy slide carefully onto the snow. The little one stumbled slightly, its legs wobbly from exhaustion, and let out a soft whimper. The man's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. This was something he'd never seen before, something he might never see again. He slowly set the axe aside and took a cautious step forward, his boots crunching in the snow. The bear's eyes met his, deep and unreadable, but there was no hostility in them. The man crouched down, extending his gloved hands toward the puppy. The little creature hesitated for only a moment before instinctively leaning into the warmth of his touch. Its tiny body was ice cold, and he could feel the faint tremor of its shivering even through his gloves. He carefully lifted it into his arms, cradling it against his chest. The puppy gave a faint sigh, almost as if it finally believed it could rest. When the man looked up again, the bear was already taking a step back. It didn't turn abruptly or flee, it simply began to move away, each step unhurried, as though its task had been completed. The man watched, still holding the puppy, as the massive form faded into the trees, its black fur blending into the shadows. Within seconds, it was gone, swallowed by the forest. The man stood there for a long moment, the early light of morning spilling across the clearing, the puppy pressed against him. He didn't know where it had come from or how it had ended up in the middle of the forest, but the truth was clear, it would not have survived the night without the bear. The thought lingered in his mind as he carried the small creature into his cabin, shutting the door against the cold. Inside, the warmth of the fire greeted them. The man wrapped the puppy in an old wool blanket and set it near the hearth. Slowly, The little one's shivering eased, and it closed its eyes, drifting into the deepest sleep it had had in what felt like forever. The man sat nearby, staring into the flames, the memory of what he'd just witnessed still vivid in his mind. Out in the forest, far from the cabin, the bear returned to its solitary life. It padded through the snow, the sounds of the human world fading behind it. Whatever had drawn it to that clearing, whatever had made it step between the wolves and the helpless pup, it did not dwell on. The wild does not often concern itself with reasons, it simply acts. Yet somewhere in the deep instinct,